God's response to this is, while the words were still in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven. Uh-oh. That's the moment where the music stops in the movie and you get a weird sound effect or a record scratch because everything is about to go awry. Daniel chapter 4 is the conclusion of Daniel's time with King Nebuchadnezzar. We have seen over the last 3 chapters and the opening of the book of Daniel, it all starts with Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Babylon who destroys Jerusalem. He's the one whom God used to rain down judgment on the kingdom of Judah that he had been prophesying through Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel. And captured Daniel in the first chapter, in the first siege on Jerusalem, brought him in. And there's this sort of narrative that's been building for a long time. In the very first chapter of Daniel, you see the king has this sort of plan to assimilate those he has captured from Jerusalem into the kingdom of Babylon, so that when he destroys Jerusalem, he has leadership from Jerusalem that's already assimilated to make it easier for sort of the lay people because they took nobility from Jerusalem. So he has this plan to assimilate this young nobility from Jerusalem, from the royal household. And Daniel's part of that group, but they defy the king when he wants them to defile their bodies with meat sacrificed to idols. And they say, we just won't do that. And so Daniel and his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, or known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the book of Daniel, they deny what he is offered from the king's table. They reject the king's offering. And yet, at the end of it, they end up looking better than all the other wise men and all the other captors. And because of this sort of rejection of the world and their obedience to God's laws, they're blessed. And they even get promoted within Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. And so there's the first sort of defiance. In the second chapter, Nebuchadnezzar has this dream that none of the wise men or interpreters can figure out. None of the Chaldeans or astrologers have any clue about what is going on with Nebuchadnezzar. And he refuses to tell them what the dream is. He said, "I had a dream, it troubled me. You tell me the dream and interpret it for me." And all the wise men are confused. And he's basically, because he is who he is, and he's the tyrant of Babylon, and he runs and controls everything, and what he says goes. Lots of stuff can happen on a whim in Babylon because of Nebuchadnezzar's absolute power. And so he basically is planning on destroying all wise men. Well, the difficult part of that is Daniel and his friends were promoted and put into the same category as the other wise men because of their promotion from the first chapter. Yet they haven't had a chance to deal with Nebuchadnezzar and his troublesome dream. So Daniel again defies the king's order and tells the guard, the captain of the guard, the eunuch, to say, tell the king, give us a chance. Don't be so hasty. Let me see what I can do. And he goes and he gathers his friends and they pray to God, asking for a solution and an understanding of this vision. They get the vision of the dream. Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar what the dream is and interprets the vision for him. And Nebuchadnezzar is once again baffled at Daniel's defiance and his ability to come through in the clutch. And Daniel's promoted again. And because of Daniel's ability and honor and integrity and what he's been able to do for the king, his friends are promoted too. But the problem is that statue that he saw in his dream also foretold of more kingdoms to come, kingdoms that would supplant and take over the Babylonian area. And that pride in Nebuchadnezzar's heart for years, after he was impressed by God's power through Daniel to interpret that vision, his pride began to swell. And in an act of defiance, he built a statue reminiscent of the dream that he had, But instead of it having multiple metals proclaiming the future succession of kingdoms, it's built in all gold, basically saying Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom will last forever. Well, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they defy the king again. They defy Nebuchadnezzar, and they refuse to bow down to the statue, and they're thrown into the fiery furnace, and they survive. And again, Nebuchadnezzar is humbled by God again, because the Jews that he brought in to assimilate into Babylonian culture keep standing up to him and keep proving to him that the one true God, Yahweh, is the ultimate God. He is the only true God, the creator, and worth worshiping. But then time passes. And then as time passes, Nebuchadnezzar's pride swells within him again, and he wants to be the king. Well, that time frame from between the statue incident and the end of Nebuchadnezzar's reign and life is what chapter 4 is dealing with in a really interesting way. Because what this is going to do is, like a great film that sort of opens up with a teaser of where the story is headed, Nebuchadnezzar comes and he stands up in a podium to address the nation and give his farewell speech to them. And then his farewell speech is detailing that time frame from between the humility of the furnace and his pride swelling up in him again, and then where he is now, as he is basically saying farewell to his kingdom because he knows his time is cut short in his old age. So that is the narrative and the story of chapter 4, and it's the end of Nebuchadnezzar's reign before we continue to move through the book of Daniel. So it's a major character and figure and historical figure in Daniel's life and in the narrative of the scriptures who we're saying goodbye to tonight. So let's look into it. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders that the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion endures from generation to generation. And what's interesting is from chapter 3 to chapter 4, when this opens up, as Nebuchadnezzar walks up to the podium to address the people in his farewell speech, his attitude does not sound all that different from the end of chapter 3, when he's impressed by Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the God that saved them in the fiery furnace, the fourth figure that looked like a son of the gods. And his overall just being impressed and letting people know that the God of Daniel, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is the one true God and should be worshipped in the land, right? And so the opening of chapter 4 sounds very similar to the end of chapter 3. But what happened in between is where the rest of the story lies. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and prospering in my palace. So now you get a little bit of insight. After praising God, he tells you where he was. I was at ease. He was very comfortable. He's the king. He's the emperor of the world at this point. He is rich beyond his dreams. His palace is in Babylon, where the Hanging Gardens of Babylon are, one of the wonders of the world. It's a beautiful place. It's a city filled with gold. He's the most powerful man on earth. He has ultimate authority. So he doesn't have a whole lot to really worry about. Everybody is ruled by him. He's in comfort and prospering at his palace. Those are words I'll never say. But Nebuchadnezzar gets to say them. And the kind of attitude that draws out of a person when they have absolute power and unlimited wealth. I saw a dream that made me afraid. As I lay in bed, the fancies and the visions of my head alarmed me. So I made a decree that all the wise men of Babylon should be brought before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the magicians, the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers came in, and I told them the dream. But they could not make known to me its interpretation. So once again, Nebuchadnezzar, as time has passed and his pride swells in him, and he's all comfortable and ruling in his palace and living in his wealth and living it up. He has a dream, another vision. God troubles him in the same way he did before. And Nebuchadnezzar, again, doesn't immediately reach out to Daniel. His first thought is to go again to, not to Daniel, who serves the one true God, but to the wise men, the astrologers, and the Chaldeans, and the enchanters, those who serve the Babylonian pagan gods. But he did learn one lesson, maybe. This time, he doesn't withhold the dream. He tells them the dream. Now, last time, he knew that he was getting snowballed by all of the enchanters, all of the wise men, because they couldn't tell him his dream. But this time, maybe he learned something, or maybe it's his pride sneaking in and he doesn't want to have to go to Daniel because he wants to be the big man on campus. He doesn't want to have to be humbled by the one true God again. So he forgoes the sort of challenge in the first chapter that he had. He says, this time I'll tell you the dream. Maybe you can interpret it. But they can't. At last, Daniel came in before me, he who was named Belteshazzar after the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And I told him, saying, O Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and that no mystery is too difficult for you, tell me the visions of my dream that I saw and their interpretations. Now, even when Daniel has come before him, this is the way he's addressing this situation. Well, Daniel, who's called Belteshazzar, because I renamed him after my gods, and who I know the spirit of the holy gods is in him. So he's already sort of trying to downplay and discredit the one true God of Israel as he needs Daniel's help with what's troubling him. So the visions of my head as I lay in bed were these. I saw and behold a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong, and its top reached to heaven. It was invisible. It was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the heavens live in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. So the first part of this dream is pretty wonderful. There's this great big tree providing shade and fruit and abundance for everyone and comfort for everyone. And health. It's just this great. But why would that be troubling to Nebuchadnezzar? Well, because it's not the end of the dream. I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said thus, chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves, and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it, and the birds from its branches, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts of the grass in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. The sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men, and gives it to whom he will, and sets it over the lowliest of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, saw. And you, O Belteshazzar, tell me the interpretation, because all the wise men in my kingdom are not able to make known the interpretation, but you are able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you. So his dream is ultimately this big, massive tree reaching up to the heavens, creating shade and fruit and branches for those to rest and sit under. It brings rest and food and health and nurtures everything. But then a watcher or some sort of angelic being comes to the tree and says, chop off its branches, cut it off, get rid of its leaves, its fruit, but leave only a stump. And then, weirdly, this angelic being goes from the message of this tree being cut down to personal, where after the tree is cut down and the stump is all that's left, it says, let his mind, let him lose his mind and wander around like a beast in the field. And it goes from an inanimate object to a living person, and that when this tree is cut down, whatever that image is meant is that this living person will go crazy and live like an animal. And the term watcher is a term that's meant to mean in some sort of angelic or spiritual being. It is found not really elsewhere in scripture, but it is found in the first book of Enoch, which is an apocryphal book, but it is quoted by Jude in the New Testament. So there might be some insight from there that you can draw of what these things look like or are talked about. But either way, it's some sort of angelic spiritual being telling Nebuchadnezzar that this thing, this person or tree or whatever it is that basically sustains and provides for everything, is being cut off, and then he will be turned into an animal. Now, that's the dream. Daniel's going to give us the interpretation, so I'll let him do that before I talk too much. All this came upon Nebuchadnezzar. No, I'm sorry. Verse 19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was dismayed for a while, and his thoughts alarmed him. The king answered and said, Belteshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation alarm you. Belteshazzar answered and said, My lord, may the dream be for those who hate you, and its interpretation for your enemies. The tree you saw, which grew and became strong, so that its top reached to the heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth, whose leaves were beautiful and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which beasts of the field found shade, and as whose branches the birds of the heavens lived. It is you, O king, who have grown and become strong. Your greatness has grown and reaches to heaven, and your dominion to the ends of the earth. And now what's interesting is this chapter it's all narrated by Nebuchadnezzar, except for when you get to hear Daniel's response to Nebuchadnezzar. This is Nebuchadnezzar's speech. He's telling the people what happened. He's telling it from his perspective, but Daniel records this in chapter 4. So we are getting Daniel's response, but we're also hearing directly from Nebuchadnezzar in his speech to the nation. But what he's saying is, or Daniel is saying in response, is that tree that brought prosperity and health and nourishment and peace and shade, Nebuchadnezzar, that's you. Just like you were the head of gold in your previous dream, this powerful, wealthy king whose kingdom is great, your kingdom has reached to the heavens in terms of your dominion and authority and power. But your pride is about to knock you down. All of that was you. Your greatness, your dominion has reached to heaven. And then he goes on to say in verse 23, because the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, in the tender grass of the field, and let him be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till the 7 periods of time pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king. It is a decree from the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. You shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and you'll be wet with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. As it was commanded to leave the stump of the roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be confirmed for you from the time that you know that heaven rules. So Daniel says, this is the interpretation. That tree's you. You saw these angelic beings, the watchers, say, this tree's getting cut down. You're going to be turned into a beast of the field. Your sanity is going to go away. You're going to live like an animal. You're going to roll around in the dew of the grass. Your mind will not be right. You'll lose the power and authority of your kingdom. but the stump was left. It wasn't completely removed or pulled up from the earth. That stump was left because when you acknowledge that the true power is from the one true God in heaven, you'll be restored. So, therefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by practicing righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the oppressed, that there may perhaps be a lengthening of your prosperity. So Daniel says, listen, I'm serving you. This is my advice. This is what's coming. The best thing you could do is humble yourself. You could actually humble yourself before God. You could start acting righteously instead of selfishly, and you could start taking care of the people you oppress instead of just collecting for yourself. That's Daniel's advice. That comes after the interpretation of the dream. That's not prophetic like the dream is. Daniel's saying, in light of what God said he will do to you, this is your best course of action. Nebuchadnezzar does not listen to Daniel's advice. Goes on to say in verse 28, all this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, and the king answered and said, is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power, as a royal residence for the glory of my majesty? So Daniel says, the best thing you can do is humble yourself. A year later, King Nebuchadnezzar is walking around in his palace, looking out at everything he owns in his kingdom and the hanging gardens of Babylon, and he goes, look at what I did. Look at how great I am. Look at the power and might and beauty of my kingdom. This is all to speak of my glory and my majesty. So, God's response to this is, while the words were still in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven. Uh-oh. That's the moment where the music stops in the movie and you get a weird sound effect or a record scratch because everything is about to go awry. O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom has departed from you, and you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and you shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men, and gives it to whom he will. Immediately the word was fulfilled against Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from among men, and ate grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair grew as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like bird's claws. So he opens his mouth in pride. A voice from heaven tells him, nope, no more. Now it's coming. And as soon as the voice from heaven is done speaking, he goes insane. He's lost his mind. He runs out into the fields and he lives like an animal, and his sanity is gone. It says that his hair grew as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like bird's claws. He had no concept of sanitation or grooming or anything that would have been civilized. He is like an animal and living like an animal. And this lasts for 7 periods of time, or 7 years, which is consistent with further prophecy in the book of Daniel. Things seem to happen in 7-year periods. Keep that in mind. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, now remember, Nebuchadnezzar is telling his story. It started out with him addressing the nation, and he's told the story, and he's gotten to the difficult part. He's gotten to the climax of the story where he has been humbled, and he's been treated like a beast, but an intelligent man is speaking to the nation he rules, telling this story. So we're about to see the resolution. At the end of days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me. And I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the hosts of heaven, among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" At the same time, my reason returned to me. For the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and splendor returned to me. My counselors and my lords sought me, and I was established in my kingdom, and still more greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven. For all his works are right, and his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. So Nebuchadnezzar is telling his story. At the end of the story, it's when I humbled myself before God and realized he is the one true God. He is the one who's in control. Heaven runs the earth, not Nebuchadnezzar. His sanity was restored, and so was his kingdom. And what he does with what was given back to him is he addresses the whole nation to say, Daniel's God, Yahweh, the God of Israel, the one true God, the one true creator of all, is the King of heaven. He's in control, and I extol him. So when all eyes are on Nebuchadnezzar, for the first time, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't say, "Aren't I great?" Because everything's been restored to him. He says it. My majesty, my splendor, my kingdom was returned to me. But with that, I say, I extol the one true God. I exalt him. And he points the people towards heaven. And that's Nebuchadnezzar's final act. That's sort of his farewell address to the nation. So this is Nebuchadnezzar's story. All of the back and forth with the children of Israel and Daniel and his friends, he's someone who was always trying to find the truth. He was looking for it in all the wrong places. He was looking for it in the occult. He was looking for it in the culture and traditions of his pagan practices and people. But every time the truth hit him in the face, he recognized that it was true. Daniel and his friends were given promotions at their defiance of the king's table. Daniel and his friends were given promotions because of what Daniel's God was able to do that nothing else was able to do with the interpreting of the statue dream. Daniel's friends were again exalted and humbled at the fiery furnace. And every time the truth hit him, he recognized that it was true. But then time passed, and that humility walked away from him. And so there's this story of this king who constantly was at war with himself. He had the culture, the pagan background, the occult backing him, and the practices that his fathers had left for him that he kept relying on and kept seeing it fail. And at the failure of the pagan practices, all of the pride went from false practices to himself until finally God said, I've had enough. You've recognized that I'm real. I'm going to humble you. And he spent 7 years losing his sanity until he finally humbled himself before the one true God. And what he did after all of these years of being this cruel, authoritarian, totalitarian king who destroyed Jerusalem, its walls, the temple, and captured the people of the kingdom of Judah. After all of that, the end of his reign was glorifying God because he had been humbled before him. So he was someone who sought truth and finally was humbled before it. After finding out what the truth was, he surrendered to it. That was the only way his sanity would be restored, by surrendering to the truth, surrendering to the one true God. But he ends all of that by sharing his story. He sought truth, he surrendered to it, and he shared his story. That is an example we can all follow. We continue to seek the truth of God. Even if we've received the gospel, it's a never-ending, lifelong journey to know more, because God is infinite. This side of heaven will never learn all that there is to learn about him. We should continue to seek truth and continue to surrender to it, even in the face of a culture that wants us to back down. Because God's truth and God's laws and the morality that God has is ultimate truth. And we should surrender to that truth and surrender to Christ, and then share our story, share who God is and what he's done for us and why we trust that he is the one true God. That's what Nebuchadnezzar did. And it's likely that as rocky as his story began, we will see him in heaven. If Nebuchadnezzar was not too far gone to end up in heaven, neither is anybody else that you're praying for. Continue the fight. Ultimately, it's up to them what they do with the truth, but model it in front of them. Seek the truth, surrender to it, and share your story. Let's pray.